Hello, and welcome to another side quest episode of Talk This. It's dangerous to podcast alone. I'm one of your hosts, Madelyn, and as always here on our side quests, you're going to hear me and Emma talk about 10 different topics, 5 each, for a minute apiece. It's going to be another fabulous side quest episode, so let's kick it off.
I don't want to talk too much about the Atlantic article we posted earlier this week of video games don't need stories, although I fundamentally disagree with it. But I was trying to think if there were any stories out there that needed to be video games, if there are any stories told in a video game that really could not be transferred to another medium without doing the story a huge disservice. And I only came up with a couple, which I think is the case if you looked at anything. Like, you could only find a couple books that could really only be books. But I came up with the Nier series, and some of the Telltale games, particularly The Walking Dead Season 1. I feel like the fact that you are doing it in both those series is incredibly important. The Walking Dead, just because of the emotional attachment that it forms, because it's you, it's not Lee, It's like that mesh of identity. And Nier, because you have to do multiple playthroughs to really find out the truth, and how that comes together is really beautiful in that way.
When is the next Pokemon Go coming out? I don't mean like their next update of Pokemon, because let's be honest, who of us are playing Pokemon Go anymore? I mean, shout out if you are, good for you, but no one who I know really is anymore. But I mean, when is the next game that, like, either one uses that technology of Pokemon Go of integrating your phone and the real world into this, like, kind of quasi-real world video game, or, like, a game that just sweeps the country like that? I feel like Pokemon Go is such a phenomenon that I was, like, immediately waiting for copycats to come out. I mean, Emma and I were brainstorming copycat games in our third episode, God of Go. We recorded it second, but it's actually our third episode. Hey, fun fact. But yeah, we were coming up with fun ways we could use this technology in our third episode, and I was sure it was going to turn up right away. But I feel like there haven't been any other games that have used this sort of technology yet. So, are they coming soon?
It feels like there have been more and more games lately that are being released kind of unfinished. And I think it's a trend that has to do with how much easier it is now to actually update your game after release, all the DLC, and the fact that you can add events to certain times of the year. But it also means that you can just keep patching your game. In the case, I think especially of BioWare's Mass Effect Andromeda, which released incredibly broken, essentially, playable, not unplayable, but ridiculous to play sometimes, like NPCs merging into each other, or your legs breaking as you're running, or all this sorts of glitches, and it just seems like not something that I like. That's not a trend that I think is good. Even Final Fantasy 15 is releasing patches, and it's not a good trend.
So Emma will probably have a segment on this too this week, but I don't care, I'm a copycat. So we just posted a story, this week posted a story on The Atlantic on our Facebook page called Video Games Are Better Without Stories by Ian Bogost. And basically in this article, he argues that because video games aren't as efficient at telling narratives as movies or novels or plays or whatever, that they really shouldn't even try, that they should just focus on the gameplay elements, the interactivity, and stick with that, and not even try to tell stories at all, that they're worse for trying to tell stories. And I think that's so dumb. That's so dumb. As much as I gripe about all these, interactive, story-based games where all you do is choose, dialogue options for your characters, and as much as I sometimes feel ripped off that your choices don't really end up making a difference at the end of the game, they're really fun. The interactivity is important. I also, just side note, love that he just rips on young adult lit as being narratively inefficient as well. Come on.
Madeline and I disagree on choice-based games a little bit, on whether your choices not mattering really matters to the quality of the game. But I do think that choice-based games, Telltale, is understandable because they make serialized content, so sometimes they have to be well, yeah, but I'm picking this up again in a year, so it can't be that different. But I feel like one-off games are really missing an opportunity to sort of find different endings. I feel like they have a story in mind, and that's not the way you should think about it when you have a one-off. you should be thinking about it like, I have these characters in this scenario in mind. How are the different ways, the different stories that could come out of this? Like games like Until Dawn and Oxenfree really are very innovative and very interesting and very good stories in ways, but they don't, like, there are differences in the end, but you still come to the same end. There's not like drastically different things that happen. And I feel like if you're not part of a series, that's an opportunity you need to take.
Something that's been really great about starting Talk This and running it for the past, like, 4-ish months now, is that it's really forced me to get back into the world of video games and have opinions about games again. Not that I don't consider myself a gamer, but during the school year when I don't really have access to a system, I usually sort of fall out of touch with what's going on in the video game world, especially since I'm not talking to Emma as much about it a lot of the time. But what's been great about this is that it's forced me to sort of stay up to date, and every time I see someone share a video game article, I'm, like, interested to read it. And I wish that there were more people that felt that way. I feel like with television and with movies and even with books and some plays, to some extent, that come out these days, it's like, some of them are like, you have to have an opinion on it. There's, like, a water cooler moment that everyone hears about. And when that happens with video games, I feel like it's always some kind of violent tragedy. And I think it would be so exciting if one day, a video game came out and, like, everyone had to have an opinion on,
I tweeted this a couple of days ago, but after playing episode 4 of A New Frontier, Gabe is really not endearing himself to me. And I'm feeling like there are ways in which kids can be done that's good and bad, and it's really sort of a gamble when you include a kid in your video game. Like Clementine I didn't find annoying, perhaps because she was younger than Gabe, and so, I don't know, adolescence is awful complicated, but I feel like he's just not just like being a teenager, it's just not, his character isn't particularly written well. But, kids are hard to write, and kids are hard to sort of bring to life as well. They had so much issue finding a voice actress for Clementine that they almost considered taking her out of the game. And then Ellie, which is also an adolescence from The Last of Us, is written well. So it's, like, hard to do kids in games. So what's your favorite kid from a video game? Let us know. Send us a message.
So it's finals week here for college student Madelyn, so because so many of us are probably playing video games instead of studying right now, hey, let's give some good justification for that for some of the positive effects of video games. So of course there's always the classic, oh, it improves my hand-eye coordination and my motor skills and my spatial awareness. But also, did you know that video games have been shown to show a correlation between, like, better test scores? So children who played online games regularly instead of just occasionally scored almost 15 points above average in math and reading, and 17 points above average in science. Now, that could be a correlation and not causation, but hey, it's good enough for me. There's also a study that indicated extensive video gaming in students in the 6 to 11 age group provided a greatly increased chance of high intellectual functioning and overall school competence. So it might be too late for me at this point, but still, I'm sure it'll still work in the 21-year-old age group, right? Right? It had better.
Okay, I said that I wasn't going to talk anymore about that article in The Atlantic because I didn't want to make the whole side quest about it, but I just have one more counterpoint to his point, in that if movies and TV shows can tell stories so much better, why is it that video games don't translate well to movies as of yet? There really have not been any video games that have been made into good movies, Like, even Assassin's Creed, which for a while looked really promising, had lots of star power behind it, lots of good special effects, even that was like, And it feels like we'll see more when something as cinematic as, like, Tomb Raider gets transferred later in 2018, but if the movies are better at telling stories, why can't they tell stories that video games told? So if you got an answer for me, let me know.
Here's one of my gripes with the video game industry. Why aren't all video games backwards compatible? For God's sake, it's 2017. Can't you make a console that'll play all of your old games? Or if not, at least release all of your old games to be purchased online. I get it, probably some licenses have expired and whatever, but I just think it's frustrating because certainly there are games that I would like to play and that I still have the discs for that I maybe wouldn't be able to on the most current console of anything. I don't really understand how the technology of this works, so if you do, shout it out, because I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than I'm making it, but still, it seems like you did already have the technology to play those games on the current system. Why couldn't you just, bring that over to the new one? We're paying like $1 million bajillion for systems. The least you can do is let me play my PS1 games or my N64 games. Haha, I mean, I didn't have an N64, but, trying to be relatable here.
Hello! Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. As always, we really appreciate it. If you like us, love us, tolerate us, please tell all your friends and family that you listen to us and to give us a shot. If you have yet to follow us on our social media, it's all at Talk This Podcast, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We post some really fun stuff on there, and I'm actually working on sort of revamping what we do every day on our social media. So you'll get to experience that. But that's all for me, and that's all for us. We'll be back with another full episode next week. Very exciting. And as always, from here at Talk This, have a great day.